we are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Ellen Finkelstein and Kaeley Pruitt-Hamm. Ellen Finkelstein is director and Kaeley Pruitt-Hamm assistant director of the Western Washington Fellowship of Reconciliation Peace Activist Trainee program. So start out, tell us about the Western Washington Fellowship of Reconciliation.
So Western Washington Fellowship of Reconciliation is part of what is a national and an international organization. FOR is the oldest peace and justice organization in the country. We're about to hit our centennial next year. So it was founded at the beginning of World War I in Europe and moved to the United States a year later. Western Washington has been a chapter and a regional organizing factor for over 50 years. We're this summer having our 55th annual summer conference at CBEC, July 4th through 7th, which is Washington and Oregon and some folks from BC who get together every summer to do workshops and have keynote speakers. And FOR addresses a range of issues around war and peace and justice issues. Over the years, different chapters have been involved in a number of different things: death penalty, racial justice, Iraq war, Afghanistan, you name it, we've been there.
And do the local chapters pretty much get to decide what they're going to focus on?
Yes, they do, which is one of the reasons it's both a blessing and a curse in some ways as a director and organizer, because lots of people have different passions in the different chapters and they work on what they want to work on because the energy comes from the local folks and the grassroots. And we endeavor to sort of connect things together. FOR's main sort of underlying foundation and principle is active nonviolence. And to engage in basically looking at the connections between different issues. 2 years ago when Occupy took off, I liked to talk to people about how there was a commonality between FOR and Occupy because we like to look at the root causes and see how they're all connected. And the different chapters and the different individuals connected with FOR pull the string that's connected that they are most intent and passionate about, but they all link up.
And in terms of your decision-making process, do you do it democratically or by consensus or something else?
It's primarily by consensus. In Western Washington, we have an area committee. In the national body, there is a national council. Kaeley happens to be currently serving on national council for Washington. And the different chapters have different mechanisms, but it's primarily consensus.
All right. So talk about your Peace Activist Trainee program. Tell us about that.
So about 13 years ago, the staff person at the time was approached, Mike Yarrow was approached by somebody who worked with the Abe Keller Peace Education Fund, Carl Schutoff. And Carl said, you know, you guys really should be doing something in the summertime for high school students. And that was sort of the genesis of the Peace Activist Trainee program. At the very beginning, it was a traditional internship program that first year, and it became clear that there was more to be done with the wealth of experience and connections that FOR had with high school students. And it's grown and flourished since then. In the 13 years, I think we graduated 78 high school students. We see it as a way to help light torches of the next generations, to expand students' toolboxes of both what they can do with activism and the different issues that are involved, particularly in the Seattle area because we're based here, and to try and offer to students in a month's time an experience that changes their lives. And we've seen many instances of it having an effect long-term on people who've gone through the program. Kaeley is a case in point because she was in the program many years ago and is now back on as staff.
So what type of skills do you try and focus on?
So a range of skills, starting with everybody's worst fear, public speaking. One of our tests by fires is having the students do soapbox speaking. On probably the third or fourth week of the program, they get up on a soapbox down outside at Victor Steinbrook Park and talk about some issue that they are passionate about, we do go through training them first and having them practice and give each other feedback. But that's an example. And frankly, having seen them do that and then to hear the stories later on, it's sort of the nothing is hard after you do that. One of our students a number of years ago, when the issue was about military recruiting in the Seattle schools was big and hot, he had signed up to testify before the school board, but he was way down at the end of the list, so didn't imagine he was going to testify. And there were a lot of no-shows, so he was called. And he gave what was the best speech of the evening, basically speaking directly to the recruiters and telling them not to lie to his friends and to the audience and telling the school board they had to do something and it was their duty. And he said afterwards to me that he only was able to do that because he'd gone through having to stand up on the soapbox and speak and think that was a crazy thing to do. So that's, sort of an example.
And he had rushed in from a soccer game, right?
Yes, yes, he had come rushing in.
Well, yeah, certainly speaking in front of, I wouldn't necessarily classify being at Victor Steinbrook as hostile, but it's certainly a lot of people that'd be walking by and not paying attention to you.
That's true. There are a lot of folks who are on the street and hang out there as well. And then there are the tourists who are maybe the hardest audience of all. Another student was talking about the excesses of our society and what people and food issues a number of years ago and talking directly at some, I believe, out-of-town folks who were picnicking there. And I don't know that they exactly resonated with what he was saying, but he got his message across. So public speaking is one piece of what we do. We do a range of things. We do some nonviolence and anti-racism training with folks, facilitation skills for meetings, what organizing is like and different skills there. Frequently, we have done a survey downtown and other places in the city and then presented that to somebody in power, be it somebody at the city council or somebody in the school board or other assorted things. Some years people have made videos, and we've gone through that. Just a range of different things.
Kaeley, talk about how you initially got involved with, what attracted you to this program in the first place?
Well, I was growing up in a really conservative area in northeastern Washington on a farm on a mountain. And I really was looking for and wondering if there were peers out there who were interested in similar topics as I was, like nonviolent movements and international relations and things were going on. It was 2005, and we're seeing a lot of terrorist acts like the London bombings and obviously 9/11, and that was really what I grew up thinking about as an adolescent. And the way that a lot of my peers were processing that was a lot of hatred towards Islam, a lot of rallying under Bush. And I was like, I wonder if there are other groups out there who are interested in different perspectives. And so my parents and my family, it had been kind of a family thing to go every year to the regional summer camp conference of FOR CBEC on the west coast of the state. And I had so much fun doing that, just being able to see that, oh my gosh, there was a group out there in the world that exists as a community that actually believes that there are other ways to solve conflict other than war, and that there are some really cool ways to address it. And so when I heard that there was a summer program for high school students, I jumped on it. I really wanted to be involved with Western Washington FOR, even though I lived 9-hour drive away. So I lived with my sister for a summer when I was 15, and I was really, really just my life was absolutely changed. I don't think that I would be here doing any of the things that I'm doing today if I hadn't been in the program. That sounds pretty dramatic, but it really, really came at a great time for me. And so there were a lot of really, really cool youth in the program. And, every year we have the students do a project together, a community project that culminates at the end of the month that they all work on and decide on together. And it's supposed to address an issue that we want to address in a creative way as a community. And in 2005, our group chose to go out on the streets of Seattle with some cameras and microphones and pose some pretty difficult questions to people who are living on the street or eating at cafes or just hanging out at a park, asking, what is your definition of terrorism? And what do you think causes it? And what do you think are the solutions to terrorism? What are some of the root causes? And we compiled people's answers quickly into a short video. It was really powerful, first of all, to be able to have conversations like that with people on the street and get people to think about it and get ourselves to think about it more. And then we had facilitation training. And so we had a screening, a public screening at a public event, and we broke out into groups, and each one of the students, we facilitated a discussion on the movie after they saw it, and that was so cool. I don't know how much of an intervention it was if we solved something in the world, but it created a ripple effect in that I absolutely fell in love with asking strangers questions on camera. And so when I went to college at Willamette University, I got grants to go to Rwanda my freshman year when I was 18, and pose questions to journalists who had been persecuted for criticizing the current government after the genocide, and orphans and child-headed households. And I interviewed all kinds of people about what they thought were some root causes of genocide and what they thought the way to true sustainable peace would be if Rwanda wasn't already on that path. And that also was life-changing. But I got that idea from the PAT program, the Peace Activist Trainee program. And I also got another idea from the PAT program. One of the things that they introduced me to, the PAT program kind of talked about through some of the awesome students who had been involved, was talking about free trade agreements that were really, really harmful to a lot of countries and the working and poor majority throughout the world, including CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement. And one of the students had just been to El Salvador and had been, in 2004, fighting the passing of CAFTA. And so I was really interested in that. So when I had the opportunity when I was 17 to go to El Salvador, I jumped on that chance and was able to stay in, cooperatives in rural areas. At the time, people were fighting the privatization of water. And that was in Suchitoto. Primarily, was the most famous community where 14 people were arrested for massive protests and held, for a year, and some people were threatened to be killed, flown over in helicopters above rivers, which they had usually, done to assassinate people during the war. So I was not only exposed to kind of poverty and exposed to war, but little did I know it, but I was exposed to privatization as a concept. As I was asking, why would it be so bad? Governments aren't perfect. Like, why should we care about privatization? And people were explaining to me that it would mean that people wouldn't be able to afford water, that the companies would be able to take shortcuts and not pay workers or have really unfair labor or environmental standards. So fast forward now, after the PhD program, I graduated with a degree in international conflict and communications. And I just got back from El Salvador again, because I'm the coordinator of Seattle CISPIS, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. And so I not only work as the assistant director of the Peace Activist Training program in the summer, but it was a funny story though, because there are graduates all over the world right now from the Peace Activist Training Program. There are people, someone who I did the program with was working in Haiti, doing, I think, media training with youth.
She was doing media training, but also using soccer as a way of helping youth in Haiti. And she's now back in the States, but she was there for a number of years and actually went to Haiti partially because when she was in the program, one of her fellow Peace Activist trainees had just read, what's the name of the book? Mountain Beyond Mountain. It's the Paul Farmer book. And he gave it to her. She read it, and she became enamored of and committed to the Haitian people. So there's another story of somebody. One of our other graduates, who isn't here today because he's in the Philippines, is coming back to be one of the co-facilitators this year of the program, but has continued to be an artist and an activist and is back at school at Evergreen, but designed a shirt for Western Washington FOR's Bring Our Billions Home campaign a couple of years ago as part of his contribution and ongoing connection to us. And he continues to use some of the skills he already had as an artist, but has developed them more and is going to work with us this summer to be on staff for the program.
Mm-hmm. And I actually, the other day, I keep on running into people who are graduates that I don't know, and I was presenting at a class for CISPIS about the opportunity to go on a delegation, about the different privatization law that the U.S. is pushing there, and I recruited someone to go on the delegation, the May Day Solidarity delegation that I just came back from. And as we were getting ready to go, I found out that she had done the PAT program a couple years after I had. And she's now working as a volunteer at Casa Latina. And she also is a Seattle University student. And so then, we found ourselves side by side speaking in Spanish at a press conference in front of the U.S. Embassy, denouncing the U.S. ambassador's policies of U.S., economic intervention. And that was a really cool feeling to know that we had not even been introduced through FOR or anything like that, but we had both had an experience that had kind of sparked a flame in us that made us want to do this kind of work and definitely address issues in a certain way. And I really hope that this year we get even more applicants who are from a wide variety of backgrounds, different schools. We've had, apparently some of the richest years have been when people come from a wide variety of racial backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, and I think that this year will be especially interesting. There isn't really a typical day in the life of a PAT, but we have this year planned a lot of thinking and exercises and field trips around looking at our community through a class lens and looking at, how food deserts exist where, you might travel to South Seattle as opposed to Vinny Ridge and see different kinds of grocery stores and different kinds of food available. And why is that? And where are the prisons located, and thinking about the prison industrial complex. And so we're excited to be definitely working on that, as well as having fun. I mean, last year we had, one day I think we had a presentation at the King County Councilperson Larry Gossett's office about the project that they had done, which was about the root causes of violence and all the gun violence and everything in our communities. And having done a survey, the students presented on socioeconomic inequity as one of the biggest things that people actually said they thought was a root cause of the violence that's happening, and encouraged Larry Gossett and the county council and city council the year before to make sure to fund social programs and human needs, not war and greed. And that fits in with our campaign that we've been working on, the Bring Our Billions Home campaign, and other work that FOR does to make sure that we're not spending billions of dollars, wasting it on the military and Wall Street and tax loopholes rather than education and healthcare. And so we had presented, to the county council, and then we, walked in the sun, and then went and sat out with a friend who led us through a writing workshop, creative writing workshop on LGBTQ issues. And, and then, we would go to Tent City and talk about homelessness. And so we never really stay in one place, but that's just kind of a sample of the different things you might do on a day.
So Kaeley has sort of described just now, in addition to the skills building that we take on, we also take on the exposure to lots of different issues that are going on. And Seattle is certainly not at a loss for different people working on good causes. And we often have to struggle as staff with trying to manage not completely overwhelming people with all of the different things that there are, but giving a breadth and a sort of range of different issues. So the last number of years, we have thought it was important to go to Tent City, and that has frequently been a really profoundly moving experience for some of the students who perhaps have not been exposed either to the real people that make up the statistics or the possibilities of self-governance that are shown by Tent City and Nicholsville and other communities. Last year, we had the opportunity to meet with some youth who were homeless through Connections, and that was also a very profound experience for some of the students. One of the most impactful things last year was we went on a field trip down to outside Fort Lewis to Coffee Strong and met with a couple of young Iraq veterans who told their stories, and that was sort of the impetus for, in part, for the students last year choosing the project around violence. They were very moved by what those two young men had said to them about their lives and how they were capable of violence, and led them to think about what was happening in their own community. A number of years ago, one of the issues that was front and center was, because of what was in the news, was police accountability and violence. And the students, I'm sometimes surprised with what they come up with for their project and who they are able to bring to the table that I, as an adult activist, can't get to come to the table. So the year that the police accountability was front and center, they held a forum down in Rainier Valley and got the director of OPA, Office of Professional Accountability, and somebody from the NAACP to sit at the same table and talk about police accountability and violence in the community, and similar to Kaeley's description, then had people divide up into groups and have facilitated discussion. But I don't believe that those two people had been at the same space prior to that, and I think they came because the power of listening to the next generation and paying attention and feeling like this is a program where leadership is certainly integral, and doing things in the community and paying attention to that. So 2 years ago, similarly, the issue was around budget priorities. And we had been working, FOR had been working on a joint memorial in Olympia that year around transferring military spending to some of the human needs that we see in our communities. And the students had done a survey, and we found out the day that they did the survey that the next 2 days later, the city council was meeting to consider a resolution. So we spent the next day, we rearranged our schedule and spent the next day with them thinking through what they would say. And they went in, and two of them testified, we were all there, to the city council They were very receptive to the students. They all, when they did their little shtick that they always do when the city council is talking, they all mentioned the students and FOR and unanimously passed the resolution that they were considering. So some of what the program is every year is dependent on what's going on in the world, and some of it is dependent on individual student interests, and some of it is what we think are important issues to really talk about.
All right. We only have a few minutes left, and similarly, people who want to sign up for this program only have a few days left to be able to do so. Can you tell people about that?
So our application deadline is Wednesday, May 15th. If people are interested, or if you know somebody and you want to pass this information along, you can go to our website, which is www.wwfor.org, and click on the Peace Activist Trainee Program poster or the project and connect to it. If you can't figure that out or you don't have a computer handy, you can call me at 206-789-5565. And we really do want to encourage folks to apply if they think they might be interested.
And what does it cost to do this program?
You know what? It costs negative $500 because the students are paid a $500 stipend. This is an amazing opportunity, and we are actually paying students through the Abe Keller Peace Education Fund because we want to make sure that those who might have to have a summer job would be able to do this program. So it's a ball, and the summer program is running from
July 8th through August 1st, Monday through Thursday. We meet 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., although there are a couple of evenings and some outside things that we sometimes schedule in.
All right. And so both anyone can apply. What's the age? You have to be in high school?
High school, we're primarily looking at people who are currently sophomores and juniors right now, so they will be around next year to connect with other people.
All right. And from anywhere in greater Seattle area or
beyond. We've had people, Kaeley certainly made arrangements, but we had somebody a couple of years ago who was from Vancouver, BC, who also arranged to stay with family friends down here. We've had people come from Mount Vernon, Bellevue, Kirkland, the Kitsap Peninsula, Kent, Auburn, and a range of Seattle neighborhoods as well. So apply.
All right. So quickly, the contact info one more time.
WWFOR.org or 206-789-5565.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you both for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.